can get any one else to do it for them, but they do not absolutely refuse when it cannot be avoided. Sometimes the embargo laid on personal names is not permanent. It is conditional on circumstances, and when these change it ceases to operate. Thus, when the Nandi men are away on foray, nobody at home may pronounce the names of the absent warriors. They must be referred to as birds. Should a child so far forget itself as to mention one of the distant ones by name, the mother would rebuke it, saying, "Don't talk of the birds who are in the heavens." Among the Bangala of the Upper Congo, while a man is fishing, and when he returns with his catch, his proper name is in abeyance, and nobody may mention it. Whatever the fisherman's real name may be, he is called Mwele without distinction. The reason is that the river is full of spirits, who, if they heard the fisherman's real name, might so work against him that he would catch little or nothing. Even when he has caught his fish and landed them, the buyer must still not address him by his proper name, but must only call him Mwele; for even then, if the spirits were to hear his proper name, they would either bear it in mind and serve him out another day, or they might so mar the fish he had caught that he would get very little for them. Hence the fisherman can extract heavy damages from anybody who mentions his name, or can compel the thoughtless speaker to relieve him of the fish at a good price, so as to restore his luck. When the Sulka of New Britain are near the territory of their enemies the Xxii, they take care not to mention them by their proper name, believing that were they to do so their foes would attack and slay them. Hence in these circumstances they speak of the Xxii as Olapsiek, that is, the rotten tree trunks, and they imagine that by calling them that they will make the limbs of their dreaded enemies ponderous and clumsy like logs. This example illustrates the extremely materialistic view which these savages take of the nature of words. They suppose that the mere utterance of an expression signifying clumsiness will homoeopathically affect with clumsiness the limbs of their distant foemen. Another illustration of this curious misconception is furnished by a Kaffir superstition that the character of a young thief can be reformed by shouting his name over a boiling kettle of medicated water, then clapping a lid on the kettle and leaving the name to steep in the water for several days. It is not in the least necessary that the thief should be aware of the use that is being made of his name behind his back. The moral reformation will be effected without his knowledge. When it is deemed necessary that a man's real name should be kept secret, it is often customary, as we have seen, to call him by a surname or nickname. As distinguished from the real or primary name, these secondary names are apparently held to be no part of the man himself, so that they may be freely used and divulged to everybody without endangering his safety thereby. Sometimes, in order to avoid the use of his own name, a man will be called after his child. Thus we are informed that "the Gippsland blacks objected strongly to let any one outside the tribe know their names, lest their enemies, learning them, should make them vehicles of incantation, and so charm their lives away. As children were not thought to have enemies, they used to speak of a man as the father, uncle, or cousin of so and so, naming the child, but on all occasions abstained from mentioning the name of a grown up person." The Alfoors of Poso in Celebes will not pronounce their own names. Among them, accordingly, if you wish to ascertain a person's name, you ought not to ask the man himself, but should enquire of others. But if this is impossible, for example, when there is no one else near, you should ask him his child's name, and then address him as the father of so and so. Nay, these Alfoors are shy of uttering the names even of children, so when a boy or girl has a nephew or niece, he or she is addressed as uncle of so and so, or aunt of so and so. In pure Malay society, we are told, a man is never asked his name, and the custom of naming parents after their children is adopted only as a means of avoiding the use of the parents' own names. The writer who makes this statement adds in confirmation of it that childless persons are named after their younger brothers. Among the Land Dyaks, Children, as they grow up, are called, according to their sex, the father or mother of a child of their father's or mother's younger brother or sister. That is, they are called the father or mother of what we should call their first cousin. The Kaffirs used to think it discourteous to call a bride by her own name, so they would call her the mother of so and so, even when she was only betrothed, far less a wife and a mother. Among the Kukis and Zemis or Kachanagas of Assam, parents drop their names after the birth of a child, and are named father and mother of so and so. Childless couples go by the name of the childless father, the childless mother, the father of no child, the mother of no child. The widespread custom of naming a father after his child has sometimes been supposed to spring from a desire on the father's part to assert his paternity, apparently as a means of obtaining those rights over his children which had previously, under a system of motherkin, been possessed by the mother. But this explanation does not account for the parallel custom of naming the mother after her child, which seems commonly to coexist with the practice of naming the father after the child. Still less, if possible, does it apply to the customs of calling childless couples the father and mother of children which do not exist, of naming people after their younger brothers, and of designating children as the uncles and aunts of so and so, or as the fathers and mothers of their first cousins. But all these practices are explained in a simple and natural way if we suppose that they originate in a reluctance to utter the real names of persons addressed or directly referred to. That reluctance is probably based partly on a fear of attracting the notice of evil spirits, partly on a dread of revealing the name to sorcerers, who would thereby obtain a handle for injuring the owner of the name. Part 2. Names of relations tabooed. It might naturally be expected that the reserve so commonly maintained with regard to personal names would be dropped, or at least relaxed, among relations and friends. But the reverse of this is often the case. It is precisely the persons most intimately connected by blood, and especially by marriage, to whom the rule applies with greatest stringency. Such people are often forbidden, not only to pronounce each other's names, but even to utter ordinary words which resemble or have a single syllable in common with these names. The persons who are thus mutually debarred from mentioning each other's names are especially husbands and wives, a man and his wife's parents, and a woman and her husband's father. For example, among the Caffres a woman may not publicly pronounce the birth name of her husband or of any of his brothers, nor may she use the interdicted word in its ordinary sense. If her husband, for instance, be called Umpaka, from Impaka, a small feline animal, she must speak of that beast by some other name. Further, a Kaffir wife is forbidden to pronounce even mentally the names of her father-in-law and of all her husband's male relations in the ascending line. And whenever the emphatic syllable of any of their names occurs in another word, she must avoid it by substituting either an entirely new word, or at least another syllable in its place. Hence this custom has given rise to an almost distinct language among the women, which the Kaffirs call women's speech. The interpretation of this women's speech is naturally very difficult, for no definite rules can be given for the formation of these substituted words, nor is it possible to form a dictionary of them, their number being so great, since there may be many women, even in the same tribe, who would be no more at liberty to use the substitutes employed by some others than they are to use the original words themselves. A Kaffir man, on his side, may not mention the name of his mother-in-law, nor may she pronounce his, but he is free to utter words in which the emphatic syllable of her name occurs. A Kirghiz woman dares not pronounce the names of the older relations of her husband, nor even use words which resemble them in sound. For example, if one of these relations is called shepherd, she may not speak of sheep, but must call them the bleating ones. If his name is lamb, she must refer to lambs as the young bleating ones. In southern India wives believe that to tell their husband's name or to pronounce it even in a dream would bring him to an untimely end. Among the Sea Dyaks a man may not pronounce the name of his father in law or mother in law without incurring the wrath of the spirits; and since he reckons as his father in law